We are all in. Yeah. I'll go in Hazira. I'll go in Hazira.
Hi everyone, can you all hear? Yeah, good. If you all want, you all can unmute. Just to check. Yeah, all good. Fourth floor.
Good evening, Roshan.
Good evening, Chloe.
There's John.
Yeah, hi Uncle John.
Yeah, hi. Waiting.
Hi
Okay,
Claude, good evening.
Good evening. Can you hear?
We can't
Can
hear
you
Claude.
hear?
Yeah, John Uncle can be heard. Claude cannot be heard.
Yeah. Can you hear now?
Claude's audio is not set up.
Claude, not yet.
Yeah, I need to look. I don't need to look. Now I know what to do. Move forward.
I better remove this mask. Claude may think I'm a minor.
He's standing.
He may put you behind bars.
Where I'm meant to be. Dr. Claude, your audio is not on. Claude and tell me to put his audio on.
Here. Turn right. Turn wait. After this, I have to do this again. Jump forward. I have to do. After jump forward, this is turn anyway.
how close can we get? Or you want to take a side view or
From this side.
from this side? Yeah.
But it will be too close.
Yeah.
Turn up, no? Turn right.
Using the section.
Yeah.
Shed light on this.
No,
Acha.
the government website. I'll give the address.
Okay. Yeah. The laptop.
Yeah, you can clear.
And then given like this, you know where you are. And hide it. Have to turn left. To turn right. So jump and then turn. Then the jump.
Mom or Shivanand? This is who, Shivanand. Oh, it was Shivanand.
Put more effect. Laptop or electricity.
It's reception. It's a one way.
Oil what is in that is a great.
He has managed because
Yeah,
that
he
speak.
put it on now.
If you ask him to speak, probably.
It's quiet for some.
Sir Claude, can you hear me? We cannot hear you. You have to unmute your mic.
Right now, pin the video to my camera, so nobody else's will become big. Talk time, I'll pin your video.
Okay. Now it is connecting, probably.
Yeah, so we are not connected.
Hmm.
Getting good angle. Yeah. You want to go closer or something? Laptop, no?
It's okay.
You could try and avoid the laptop actually to the eye contact. But that's okay, you know, because in the talk that we all this will come, or it can be cut later. No, what I'm saying.
You want me
can
to
do what in-
lessen it?
You'll be using this.
Don't worry. I don't. I can manage
Oh.
it.
This, I can't.
Somebody is doing some thali, this thing for COVID.
How many minutes did it?
It's 1 hour address, and then
Just,
question answer.
so you will be interacting.
Yeah.
So yes, yes.
Who?
No.
No.
Yes.
Yeah.
Swapnesh,
Hi, Roshan.
you're
Yes, so
traveling
you
or
are,
what?
yeah, I'm in the bus, yeah.
Ah, okay.
So you are giving today's presentation.
No. Advocate John is already over here.
Okay.
Why I look like I'm in the court or something, no?
Yeah.
Hmm. I brought one of the rooms of Advocate John. Encroached.
Encroached.
If you are in the bus, don't keep the speaker on, huh? Because we thought what advocate is explaining, others may come and catch your neck. I think most of the people are on. We have like 27 of you already on. Only Dr. Cloud's mic, if he can put on, would be great. Secondly, is today there will be no interference or limitation to time because we have purchased the subscription. So there is no limitation on time. We have the paid version now of Zoom. So that all is sorted out. And we will start sharp at 6 o'clock. We have another 6 minutes. So if you can't hear what I'm saying now, or you need to adjust your volumes or anything, you check now. And as usual, the instructions are, if you want any question to be asked during the session, you need to use the chat function. Okay. So make sure you are able to go to your chat function and use. You can check that now if you like. Okay, so chat function is there. I sent him ask to unmute, but I think he's waiting for the session to start. Another thing is the speaker view and the gallery view. If you can see the word speaker view on top, that means you're not on speaker view. You need to click on it to get to speaker view. And I would suggest you view it through speaker view. So you will see one big video down of the person who I will pin the video. Pin the video means that is the video that will be featured down. Like for example, now I've pinned my video so you can see only mine. And I will pin Advocate John's video now. So you'll be able to see his video, not mine. You see? So you try to use the speaker view. If you can see the word speaker view on top, you need to click on it. That is when you'll get to the speaker view.
Call Claude or unmute Claude from his, yeah, just tell Roshan. Because he is sending messages on chat. Claude, Dr. Claude. Dr. Claude is sending messages on chat, so just unmute him. Okay. I think he may not be unmuted because he seems to be connected, but
yeah. Somebody is having some snacks and all. You can use the share button down. Claude, you're able to unmute, right? I mean, I think he's kept it for the right time. No? That no, I'm sure he knows and waiting for the right moment. No.
okay. Okay.
We also have CCR TV who has come in to record today. So the video that will be on YouTube later on will be much better quality than the one I did last time. Last time I tried with my camera and it was good, not professional. So today CCR TV has sent their person to record the entire teaching.
Okay. Okay, you want to do a test? Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you, Dr. Erica John. Oh, you're with the camera. Okay, okay.
The video test was going on. You can hear me.
Yes. We need Claude to set up that mic soon.
Yes. As soon as they tell me to begin, I'm ready.
Just let me know.
Yeah.
You can hear the audio on the laptop, no?
Claude says, yeah. Claude says to begin. Yeah. In the chat,
You can
yes.
hear that audio?
Yeah, laptop also.
Oh, Claude is connecting now. Claude, you're on now. Oh, but can't hear. My phone is ringing. Current. Claude is not audible still. Okay, okay, okay. Okay, good evening, everyone. I think I'll have to begin since Dr. Claude cannot be heard on the mic. I'll just read the introduction of today's speaker, that is Advocate John Abreu Lobo, who's already set with his Zoom mic and his laptop and everything ready to give us the talk. So basically, Advocate John Abreu Lobo is a practicing advocate of 22 years. He has fought several public interest litigation cases His latest is the writ petition for Saligaonkars, challenging the expansion of the Saligaon garbage plant that we all know about. He began practice in the High Court, worked there for 10 years, then migrated to the lower courts. So he brings an interesting dimension to handling of these issues covered under administrative law today. And so the topic for today is about today's topic is on Advocate John. What's the topic today?
The topic is administrative justice.
Administrative justice. So he'll be explaining about Comunidades and the functioning of
All the administrative departments.
magistrates, etc. Okay. So over to you, Advocate John Abriolobo, and we have 1 hour for your talk. So I'll keep you on time as well. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Roshan. I thank Dr. Claude for giving me this opportunity. And without wasting much time on pleasantries, I would like to start today's topic. Now, basically, we know what a government is. A government is supposed to be of the people, for the people, and by the people. And I would like to start by quoting Thomas Jefferson, who said that when the people fear the government, there is tyranny. But when the government fears the people, you have true liberty. And this is the point which we are on today, on the administrative justice. Administrative justice means that the people who are to be governed by the government have to also be under checks and balances. Administration is one of the tools whereby the government brings to the people and lays before it and also executes all the programs and decisions for socio-economic welfare. So basically, when we say administrative justice, we are referring to the different departments of the government in this process of administration and working out all its plans as well as keeping it under checks and balances. Now, administrative justice is one of the firmest pillars of the government. By this, I mean that whenever there is a need for something to be done, they are the hands of the government which actually work and see that that job is done. Every department in the government has its own mechanism, that is, its own executive officers who are in charge of implementation and actual seeing that the work is done. For example, we have in one of the administrative departments, which is panchayats, we have the administrative head who is the director of panchayats. So also every department of the government has such administrative head. The basic structure of administration is we have the state government which has its council of ministers. But besides that, we have the different departments of this government which are in charge of different spheres of the administration. There are so many departments. You have right from home, excise, panchayats, labor, so on and so forth. So these are the administrative blocks of the government. Now today I was asked to give you all a broad outline on how these government authorities, that is the administrative departments, work in the administration of justice to all the people. An authority which is there in this department as its head is given powers under the act and rules which govern its functioning from day to day. So every authority gets its powers from the act which governs it. As we all know that law governs each and every one of us, and ignorance of the law is no excuse. So also, every department which functions also is bound by these rules and regulations. Very often, there are hitches that come about in this administrative part of the department, but those are to be outlined and smoothened by the legislature. So every administrative department gets its powers, like the courts of law, from the legislature which governs its functioning. The difference between courts of law and these administrative departments is basically in their structure. We have in administrative departments certain authorities who are given powers as to how they are to go about their functions and duties. Now, when these functions and duties entail issues of public right, that is a personal individual right. For example, the panchayats are given administrative power to decide on the issuance of licenses for construction. They are bound by certain rules and regulations as to how they are to go about in the granting of these licenses, and are expected to go within the framework of these rules and regulations in granting these permissions. But at the same time, there are checks and balances. When I am speaking about courts and I want to differentiate them from these authorities, we would differentiate only on the basis that they are not governed by the civil procedure code, the laws of evidence, and so on and so forth, on which the civil courts put great rigor. However, whenever an authority is deciding something which gives a right or by which a right accrues to a particular person, they are given the title of being a quasi-judicial authority. A quasi-judicial authority is an authority which decides certain rights and gives its decision on those rights, but does not have the power as that of a civil court. But after various decisions of the Supreme Court and the High Courts, these quasi-judicial authorities are now streamlined to function in a manner akin to a court. So they cannot do things arbitrarily according to their whims and fancies, but they have to do them according to guidelines that have been given. Whenever a quasi-judicial authority is proposed with a decision on a particular issue, they are required to enumerate the facts that stand before it. They are required to draw conclusions on the basis of the facts that are placed before it, and then decide on the official action and give its final decision on that matter. Normally, the courts as are functioning have a total different manner of functioning as compared to a quasi-judicial authority. And very often, quasi-judicial authorities used to act in a manner where they say that whatever is placed before them, they will give a decision on that matter according to whatever they desire. But now, after that procedure has been streamlined, they are now required to follow certain principles. One which is of most importance are the principles of natural justice. Now, the principles of natural justice require that whenever a quasi-judicial authority is deciding a matter primarily of conflict between two persons or parties, they are bound by the principles of natural justice, which require that authority to hear both sides before taking a decision in the matter. And this is one of the basic principles which a statutory authority or a quasi-judicial authority is required to follow. Now, you may suddenly wonder where I have brought this word statutory authority. The statutory authority, as I first told you, that every department is controlled by their rules and regulations that govern them. So in that department, the authority that is created by that statute to hear and decide on matters that are before it is called the statutory authority. Because it performs functions whereby it decides the rights of a particular party, they are given this mantle of being a quasi-judicial authority. So they are one and the same. Quasi-judicial is because he performs that function, and statutory authority is because he gets that power from the statute. Now, as I said, one of the basic ingredients that I would like and propagate each and every one of you to have while dealing with these statutory quasi-judicial authorities are the 3 P's. P for parent, 3 P's. They are: 1, patience. Second is perseverance. And the 3rd P is politeness. Very often, we get agitated whenever we visit these departments or deal with them or are dealing with such statutory authority. But in my limited years and my few gray hair that I have, one thing that I have learned is that politeness can do wonders. Politeness and patience, when they are entwined together, can have you do wonders in getting your matter sorted out with these administrative authorities. It is difficult, no doubt. But I don't know how many of y'all have seen the movie Munna Bhai. In that Munna Bhai, he has a phrase which is called as Jadoo Ki Jappi, which is a hug. Of course, today we are faced with times of social distancing where that may not be permissible and may not be accepted also by the other side. But it is all that I want to bring about is this issue of politeness with patience. Whenever you are coming across administrative authorities, the basic structure is this. On top, we have the government. Then we have your districts, that is north and south. Within them, we have talukas. And within the talukas, we have your village panchayats and municipal councils and corporation wherever they may. So these are the basic structure of the administrative departments. And all the departments flow from these basic structure of the administration in the state of Goa. The major function of all administrative departments is to work for the socio-economic welfare of the society. Now, when we say socio-economic welfare, it covers broadly each and every aspect of our lives. That is our social life, our economic life, which includes our well-being, the well-being of the society, and the well-being of the environment. So these three spheres are what the administrative justice system seeks and endeavors to accomplish. And it is with this in mind that we have various policies which are brought about by the government in its legislative capacity and given to these administrative departments to see that there is a socio-economic upliftment of the various sections of society. Now, the major hassles that are faced by everybody in dealing with these administrative departments are red tapeism, improper management, inefficiency, no accountability, weak or complete senseless local governance, and of course, to top it all, corruption and political interference. We have various departments that are created by the government for the administration of these departments and for the percolation of those policies that are created to every department. Now, I was asked that when we go to a department, how do we go about in getting our grievances redressed? For one, I would say that the first thing that we have to understand when dealing with any government department is to put your things in writing. There can never be anything that can be done in any department which is to be done orally. Most of the departments have their framework by which there is a complete protocol in dealing with any aspect. I will start with panchayats. Very often, we expect accountability of panchayat governance through our elected ward members. And we say the usual phrase that is used by everyone, ward member ak sangla. That doesn't work. Any grievance that you have when you are working with an issue of a panchayat has to be done by addressing a letter, however badly worded. See that your subject covers whatever is your grievance. Do not make your applications a storytelling venture. Be concise, be precise, state your grievance, and expect your redressal in that letter itself. What you want to be done. What is the problem? What is the solution? That letter is to be addressed. It can be addressed to the panchayat, sarpanch, but the main person who is the administrative head of the panchayat is the secretary. He is a person who executes each and every decision of the panchayat that is taken by the panchayat body, and he is the one who is responsible for placing everything before the panchayat body. So the person who is responsible in the administrative justice system of the panchayat is the secretary. Once a letter is inwarded to the secretary, he is bound by law to place it before the panchayat body in its next meeting. So therefore, he is the person who takes all the grievances to him. Of course, it is the panchayat sarpanch Can you all hear me?
Oh, yeah, now it's okay.
Okay. Was I blank for some time? Can you hear me now? Thank you. Sorry for that. We are all faced with certain technical glitches. All I was saying is that when you're dealing with a panchayat, the principal person who is in charge of the administration of justice in that department of the panchayat is the secretary. He is required by law to sign all the correspondences in relation to the execution of any decisions by the panchayat body. Of course, he is bound by the decisions taken by the panchayat body, but he is also the administrative head. Therefore, for the grievances to be placed before the panchayat body, he is the principal person. In the execution of the decisions taken by the panchayat, he is the nodal person and not the sarpanches or the panches, as you may term them to be. They are responsible for the decision-making process on your applications. And it is therefore this panchayat body which decides any application made by you. But the person through whom it goes has to be the secretary. In a panchayat, when you're dealing with a panchayat, you have to also claim, if there is some dispute, that you have a right to be heard, which very often the panchayats seem to be oblivious of. So therefore, by various decisions of the High Court, once a person claims such a right, he is bound to have that claim addressed to and be heard by the panchayat if an application made by him or a grievance made against him is being decided by the panchayat, and some decision which is likely to affect, as I said, the primary reason by which you can claim to be heard is that that decision affects your personal rights or the rights that you have claimed to be made by your application. So therefore, that is what I call the principle of natural justice. So that is as regards the panchayats. Now we have the departments which are the revenue departments. That is the departments of the collector, the mamladar, the block development officer, the talati. Now, basically, the hierarchy of these departments is we have the collector of that area. As I said, we have two areas, north and south. So there is collector north and there is collector south. There may be additional collectors depending on how the government requires their functioning based on their placement, whether they want to place them in the nodal office of the collectorate or also want to place them in different talukas which form part of these districts. The additional collectors are equivalent to the collector but will decide matters as may be placed before them by the collector or as the government may determine them to decide. So every department of the collector will have additional collectors who are deciding certain aspects because there is a big umbrella of matters which come before the collectorate. Now, let us start with the base level. At the base level of this department, we have the talati. Now, a talati is a government officer who is placed in each and every village. A person may be placed in more than one village depending as to how the government decides his posting. He may be placed in a particular village with additional charge of many villages. Now, what is the function of this talati? The talati is the person who, before whom you can make an application to get your Form 1 and 14. Now, what the government has done is for the better functioning of many of these departments, they have already prepared forms which are readily available with these officers for the various services that they provide to the general public. So there is a format of basically when you are asking for Form 1 and 14, you just fill the survey number and the village under which this survey number of the Form 1 and 14 that you wish to get is located. So these forms are readily available with the talati. What the talati is also required to do is you can also get the registration of your cultivation in the Form 1 and 14 by submitting the application to this talati. He is supposed to have what is called as the cultivators register. Now, if you see your Form 1 and 14, you will have that cultivators register down as to register the amount of crop if you have made it so available to the talati. Of course, this is not being done very often. The third role of the talati is, it is the talati who is supposed to go for inspection whenever you are doing a mutation and entering your name into the Form 1 and 14. It is this officer who is supposed to go to the site and see. So whenever you have a mutation that is to be done, very often, if it is done for the first time and it requires a local inspection and it is not subjected to certain registered documents by way of which you are asking for a mutation, it is this talati who gives a report of the on-site possession for the purpose of entering your name in Form 1 and 14. Then at the next level, we have the Mamladar. Now the Mamladar is having dual capacity. He is a court under the Mamladar's Courts Act, but he is also an executive magistrate. Therefore, a Mamladar performs dual functions. When a Mamladar is sitting as a Mamladar's court, he performs functions under the Mamladar's Courts Act, where he is given the authority akin to a court, but to perform specific functions. A Mamladar in his duties as a court is because he performs functions under the Munkar Act and the Agricultural Tenancy Act. When he performs functions under those two acts, he acts as a court, and therefore we always address matters whenever they are arising out of the declaration for tenancy or the declaration of munkarship as being in the court of the Mamladar. The Mamladar's Courts Act defines the procedure and the manner in which the Mamladar functions under the Agricultural Tenancy Act and the Munkars Act. He also performs functions under the various acts which are in force, which give him powers of a statutory nature. So he performs dual functions, that is judicial function and statutory functions. For example, the Mamladar is supposed to be the executive who heads all disputes in relation to devasthans. Devasthans are temples which are registered with the state government and have committees for their administration and work. The Mamladar is also the statutory authority who decides issues relating to sluice gates which are there within his jurisdiction in the taluka. The Mamladar also decides on the maintenance of law and order in a particular area coming under his jurisdiction. So he has been given dual functions. Now I will just pause here for a moment to highlight that very often we face difficulties whenever we are going to the office of the Mamladar. And these difficulties occur primarily because he is given these dual functions. There was a big agitation at one point of time by the legal fraternity on behalf of all the litigants, where they had urged the state to have these Mamladars bifurcated as Mamladar judicial and Mamladar executive. Because very often when people go for their cases and their matters, you find a notice posted out that he is gone for law and order and so on and so forth. But he is given that function as an executive magistrate. He is also performing judicial functions. And that is why very often there is a big disturbance in the administration of justice in this department of the Mamladar. But till the government does something to remove this anomaly, we will still be faced with this difficulty. Now, when we were talking of the Mamladar, I will just read out to you few things in relation to the Mamladar's powers. Now, when he performs judicial functions, he does so under Section 4 of the Mamladar's Courts Act. I don't want to make this too much of a technical matter, but just to highlight what are his functions when he is performing functions of under the Mamladar's Court Act. He has powers to remove any impediment, that is any blockage that is caused to the natural or customary flow of water in a defined channel, or remove such impediment which is likely to cause damage to the land use for that purpose. He has got the power to give immediate possession of any land or premises used for agriculture or trees or crops or fisheries, or to restore the use of water from any well, tank, reservoir, canal, so on and so forth, whichever are the publicly used premises or individually used lands which have been wrongfully taken. Then he has power under the Munkars to give immediate possession of a dwelling house of a person who claims to be a Munkar who has been dispossessed. Then to restore or cause to be restored right of way which has been obstructed or encroached upon other than by due authority of law. And to restore or cause to be restored any right of use of water. So these are his powers which come under the Agricultural Tenancy Act, under the Munkar Act, and under the general law of easements where a public right has been infringed. If a public flow of water, a public right of way has been encroached or blocked, it gives power to the Mamladar under Section 4 to redress this grievance. Besides this, the Mamladar's office is used for obtaining residence certificate, solvency certificate, divergence certificate. Divergence is when there is a difference in the names. Now, very often we have difficulty because there are spelling mistakes or people have used aliases. For example, I am one of them. My name in all the certificates is João, but everybody calls me John. Fortunately, in all the required certificates, my name has been correctly spelled. But people sometimes, in doing their documentation, which is latter, like maybe a passport or an Aadhaar card or a PAN card, sometimes there is some spelling mistake. Instead of João, he has used John, and then all his certificates say João, and identity card says John. So for these, it is the Mamladar. Then also for obtaining caste certificates, dependency certificates, income certificates, ration cards. Then for execution of the 20-point program, where you want allocation of a house under the 20-point program. Then also for your correction of names or inclusion of names in the electoral roll. So these are basically the duties of the statutory nature which are performed by the Mamlatdar. Now, I was also asked to touch upon the aspect as to when you approach the Mamlatdar for the purpose of declaration of your rights of tenancy or munkarship, vis-a-vis an individual or Komnidar. The only person against whom such rights of munkarship and tenancy cannot be claimed is the government. Whereas under all other, whether it be Komnidar or church properties or individuals, the rights of tenancy are protected, tenancy and munkarship. Now, under the Agricultural Tenancy Act and the Munkarship Act, the applications for the grant of such declaration require you to make a proper application. And when I say proper application, it may not require legal expertise, but I would always advise to have proper persons showing you the proper path when you are dealing with such matters. It may be a person who has legal knowledge, or it may be a person who is a lawyer. It can be either one. Because very often people tend to make such applications in a very cursory manner. There are certain ingredients in both these laws which are required to be spelled out properly when making such applications. Therefore, application of mind by a person having legal knowledge would be advised for by me when going before such authorities. Remember one thing, though the act, that is for example the Munkar Act and the Agricultural Tenancy Act, say that it is not necessary or mandatory that a lawyer be present to argue the case. It is only by law the person who can argue the case himself, and it cannot be done by a power of attorney holder. A power of attorney holder represents the person in law but cannot represent him in court. That means a power of attorney cannot argue for a person. That privilege is given only to a lawyer. So when a person is agitating his right, he has to do it by himself or by a legal practitioner who is the only person who is authorized by law to appear for a particular person. I am not saying that the power of attorney does not have right to sign the wakalatnama for a lawyer to appear. But judicial pronouncements clearly state that the power to appear in the court and plead is only can be exercised by the person himself or by a lawyer. So on the other note, I was on the ingredients. For example, a munkar, he has to be able to plead the hierarchy by which he is making that claim. he is required to plead that that is a place of his permanent residence. So all these intricacies of the law, agricultural tenant, he has to plead that he has been in possession of that land from many years prior to 1975. He has to plead how he has cultivated, what he has cultivated, what he has used for that cultivation. If he has used certain help, that he has been using that help and been continuously in uninterrupted possession of that land for the purpose of agriculture. So when we deal with these intricate aspects, we may have to require certain help. Now from the Mamladar, we move to the deputy collector. The deputy collectors are below the level of collectors and perform certain functions which by law are given to them. One of them is for obtaining sanad for conversion of land. The second is partition of holdings of land. For correction of clerical or entries in the revenue records. He is also the authority for obtaining permission for transportation of dead bodies from Goa to another state. You need to get his permission. Then sound permissions under the Noise Act is the person of the level of deputy collector. The deputy collector is also the authority before whom you are required to appear if the police, in their opinion, report to the deputy collector that you are a person who is likely to cause disturbance in the area. So a notice is issued to you and you may be caused to appear before him to execute a bond or otherwise show why it is not required to do so. These powers are with the deputy collector. Now, when we are discussing, now last I will finish because of the time constraint. I was given a slight alarm. Above is the level of collector. Now, collectors are the authorities who are appointed by law to oversee the functioning right up to the level of talati. Collectors see many aspects, that is in relation to land acquisition. Then if you are obtaining for arms license, then if you want to obtain a license for a movie theater under the Cinematography Act, then you want to run a video parlor. He is also the authority which decides on granting the permission for location of a petrol pump. Then he also decides issues under the Explosives Act if you want to store and use explosives. He is also given the authority to be the nodal authority when you are applying for citizenship or any documents in relation to your citizenship. He has powers for publication of local newspapers. If you want to start a newspaper, he has the power to grant domicile certificates. And he is also the adjudicating authority in relation to payment of stamp duty under the Registration Act for registration of sale deeds. Now, I have broadly touched upon the various administrative powers that govern the administration of justice in the level of these authorities. Just to wind up, I would say and give you only these guidelines. 1. Always have your matter in writing. 2nd, take the help of a confidant, somebody who you trust, to look through it. Sometimes when we are agitated by certain things, we put them down in a manner of which the authority takes utmost advantage. Be concise and precise rather than long and more enumerative. You are not answering an exam where by looking at the length of your answer, you would get better marks. Sometimes being short and sweet always helps you better in the long run. 4th, always see that you give an entry of any application and take the most important part of that entry is to see that you have the acknowledgement of such entry. And 5th is persevere and follow up with your application. Don't expect the authority to process it if you don't persevere with it. Whenever you are asking for a particular action to be taken, and that action involves another person's rights or to be executed against another person, it would be best at the inception itself to ask for a personal hearing in the matter, so that these decisions are taken by giving a go-through of all the facts before the authority. Whenever you are placed with certain, like the second person is called upon and gives his reply, if you have any comments on that, see that you put your comments in writing. Whenever you have your things in writing before any statutory authority, it will help you in the long run in showing how that authority has gone wrong. When you are giving these points in reply, reply only to the facts. Do not be argumentative in your reply, which will allow the authority to take advantage. Sometimes speaking less means getting more. Always remember another aspect which many of these statutory authorities do not take into account is when they are deciding matters of a statutory nature. That means a procedure prescribed by the statute, whether it is panchayat, that is the level of the panchayat, or it can be any authority. It can be excise department, transport department, whichever department you go to, mamladar, whatever. Have the fact of the matter that this matter should be decided by him in open court. There is a judgment by the Honorable High Court which mandates, very often these authorities say, okay, we have heard the matter, close it. We will communicate you the order. Say no. Please fix a date for the pronouncement of the order. I will be present. Because very often they pronounce it on whichever day is convenient to them, and they post it, the office posts it whenever it pleases, and it reaches you after a particular point of time. Sometimes you have to file an appeal, and they say that the date is already passed, then you have to file an application for condonation of delay, and you get caught in all this legal jargon. So whenever an authority is deciding a matter, and we have to bring this change, and many people ignore this, please ask for a date to be fixed when the authority is going to pass that decision, so that you may be present and you may get the copy of that applied for on that very date. This is the second difficulty that people face, because when they get the copies, they are just ordinary copies, they are not certified copies. And sometimes for the purpose of filing of the appeal requires you to have a certified copy. So these are the basic frameworks that I have. Now, before I've got my final before I go, I am going to show you one of the basic acts which has been hidden in the closet by the government. Though this act has been passed, this act is very much in force, and the government must be called upon to enforce it by y'all who call upon the government to enforce it. As I said, the executive will not work unless pushed to do so. But at the same time, don't forget the 3 P's that I have spoken to you about. The act that I was talking to you about is this act. I do not know whether you can see it. The Goa Right of Citizens to Time-Bound Delivery of Public Services Act 2013. Now, this act gives all the departments a particular time frame under which any and all of your applications made under that statute by which they have the power and you are approaching them to do so, they are given a time limit within which they have to dispose of those applications made by you. This is a very, very important act, the Goa Right of Citizens to Time-Bound Delivery of Public Services Act 2013. The government has also recently notified the various time frame under which they are required and the various departments by which they have to conclude and give a decision on the different applications which you all make before it. So do not forget that whenever you are going for applications to be made to these authorities for anything that you want, there is a time-bound frame under which they have to function. I hope I have been lucid and clear in whatever I have conveyed. My apologies if I have not been understood or any glitches. I would gladly clear them in the question answer session. And forgive me for my inadequacies if I have failed to live up to the expectations of some persons who thought otherwise. Thank you very much, and I leave it open to any question answers that you may have.
Thank you very much, Advocate John. The session was absolutely fabulous. Right now, for all the participants, we will be having a 2-minute break. During this break, Advocate John will go through the chat and he will try and see what questions have been asked. Right from 6:15, Karan has asked the first question. So he may get prepared with answering these. Besides the questions that are already in chat, you have the opportunity now to type more questions if you have. And as and when the chance comes, I will allow you to unmute your mic so you can correspond with Advocate John once again and get clarity if there is anything required. So you have maybe 2 minutes from now to just maybe if you want to go to have water or something and come back, 2 minutes we'll give you.
There are many questions.
Hmm.
You can copy
I've
that
seen
in a word if you want.
No, that's okay. I'll take one by one and answer them. I can start the answering, or you want me to?
Just 2 minutes.
Fine.
Because now they want
I'll
to
just go through the others. Karan is there.
You're okay, you need some water or something?
No, I have. Thank you.
Karan has asked most questions.
What I can say is, what I can do it to make it easier is, Karan says this and I can do it.
Question.
Okay, so I think we've given about 2 minutes already, and that's right. Okay, John, to unmute. Huh? So I think the first questions were by Karan. So I would suggest Karan to unmute his mic.
Okay, can I start?
Yes, Advocate John.
Yeah.
Only thing.
First question was: are
1 minute.
quasi officers trained in law? Fortunately for us, now most of the departments which are it has been happening for the last 10 years now, where there was a revision in the requirements quota. Whenever they are having particular persons to a particular post, they are required to have judicial knowledge. That is, they are required to have a degree in law. But I understand the question, because earlier this was not a mandatory requirement, where they were not required to have judicial knowledge or knowledge in law. But as of now, I would say that around 80% of the more than 80% of the quasi-judicial authorities have a degree in law and are trained in law. The second question of Karan was in relation to conflict of interest, that their decisions would affect the department. This is a question which is pertinent, but very often quasi-judicial authorities are deciding conflicts between persons who have come before the department. When it is matters in relation to taxation and otherwise, say by the excise department and so on and so forth, you may be right that you would apprehend that they have a conflict of interest, because if they decide, it would have repercussions on the revenue, so on and so forth. But very often there is a mechanism within them which allows you to take it higher, where arbitrariness, that means non-application of mind to that decision, is patent, because it would cause revenue hurt or so on and so forth, is obvious on the face of it. So very often statutory authorities have an appellate authority above it. For example, against all these decisions by the for example the panchayat, you have the director of panchayats or the block development officer who is above and not concerned with the petty politics or the pettiness of the particular panchayat in question. And that person would then decide in a more open manner rather than the personal pettiness and political infiltration that gets into the decision-making process when it is of a particular panchayat. So these there are mechanisms within that to take care of this issue of conflict of interest. Quasi-judicial officers being punished in any way if they are subsequently found by the courts not to have followed the principles of natural justice. Now, very often, I mean, punished, I would say leniency in law towards government officials has in some way resulted in them not feeling as responsible in their decision-making process as they ought to be. But there is a mechanism of making a complaint in relation to a officer who has not performed his duties in a way he is required to do so. Especially if he is asked for a particular to function in a particular manner and he goes against it, and that is by way of a decision of a court. Definitely, for one, he is in direct contempt of the orders of the court. That if the court has given him particular directions and he does not do them. But if there are no directions and you ask for a personal hearing and to follow the principles of natural justice and he does not do so, that is one of the basic grounds on which that decision can be quashed and set aside by the superior authority. As well as far as punishing him, that is a departmental issue, and you can always ask for such punishment by making a particular grievance to the higher authority. How much that sees the light of day is a different issue. Rui Ferreira, any more questions, or can I go to the next?
I think Karan may have more.
Okay.
Karan, are you done?
Yeah, that's fine. Just follow the order, and then when next question comes up, that's fine.
No, since I am dealing with these 3 questions basically that you asked, if you want any further clarification.
No, that's fine. Thanks so much.
Okay. Then Rui Ferreira, political cloud. Okay, that is not a question. Can a department refuse to take, Karan's question, can a department refuse to take a letter if you do not provide your address on it? Now, in my view, whenever you address a letter to a department, the requirement of providing your address is something where if you want to hear from the department or the department wants to communicate its answer to you, they cannot refuse to take if the address is not proper, is something which I would say it is better that you provide your complete address, including your telephone number, if you are making a particular grievance and want that the department follows up or communicates with you. This, if you don't provide, can be one of the reasons where the department can claim complacency and say, we didn't, your address was not this thing, so we did not reply to your letter. So it would be better if you provide your full, because if you are going with a particular grievance or have something to be redressed and expect communication in that matter, then it is but natural that you give your complete details.
Can I just ask a follow-up on that? In a situation where one doesn't expect any direct reply to you, such as, for example, if you're complaining about some random field that you've noticed that has been filled up, what often happens with these departments, I've noticed, is that when you do provide them with contact
They
details
communicate it to the other
to
side.
the criminal. Exactly. And then they harass you. So if the intention is just to put them on notice, look, I've noticed this. I was driving around the other day. I noticed that survey number such and such is filled up. Should you not be able to submit the letter? Because when I've been to the Banglatar for Borders, he said, no, we cannot take the letter.
Practically, they under no circumstances can refuse to take a letter if you do not provide your address. Okay. If that is the case, you can even, I mean, it's wrong to suggest that, but you can, today there are people who are ghosts. They are giving complaints in fictitious names and fictitious addresses. Now, two departments which I know of, where they are not supposed to insist on the names of the complainants, is one is the CRZ authorities. They are bound to take action. They are not required to this. And second is when you are complaining about noise pollution. When you phone up, there is I had done that matter as amicus, and I said that everybody, there is a lot of situation where everybody is afraid to complain because we know the patronage that the noise makers enjoy in these situations. And when you make a complaint, they are not supposed to insist on the name and address of the complainant. But otherwise, I mean, answering your question is the department cannot refuse to take such a complaint. If you have that grievance or they are not taking it, send it by registered post.
Okay, thank you.
Then, is the village panchayat secretary obliged to give members of the public a copy of the resolutions made by the village panchayat on demand for the same? Now, my answer to this is there is no requirement of obligation on the part of the village panchayat secretary to give you, but you can always make an application under the Right to Information Act, which would be best done because under that there is a mandate that they provide you with. If you make an ordinary application, your correspondence can go back and forth. When you do it under the Right to Information, it's mandated. How does one know which collector, additional collector to approach for a particular issue within a district? Now, for that, I would tell you one thing, and I wanted to share this. Thank you for bringing it to my notice. There is a site. You all can just take the name of the website. It is www.goa.gov.in. And thank you for this question because I wanted to share and it just completely skipped me. Now, in view of the, when you type this or you Google only Citizens Charter for Goa, Citizens Charter for Goa. And it will take you to this site and give you the Citizen Charter. Now this, when you Google and get it, and you get that Citizen Charter, Government of Goa, it outlines all the departments within the state of Goa, what each department does, and who is responsible for a particular thing in every department. Right from Administrative Tribunal, Bal Bhavan, Captain of Ports, North Goa, Department of Tribal Welfare, everything. All the departments within the state of Goa are highlighted and who you should approach there. And thanks to the Right to Information Act, these things have been mandated. So it is easily available on the net in this Citizens Charter, where and who is responsible in each area for a particular thing. Your next question, Karan, was if making an appeal to a quasi-judicial officer, does one have to hire a lawyer or can one represent oneself? As I have made it very clear, you can represent yourself before any quasi-judicial authority in your own cause. You cannot represent someone else. Oneself in one's own cause can be represented, and there is absolutely no requirement of being represented by a lawyer.
Can I just ask a follow-up on that? Does that also extend to the courts, the lower courts, the session
Yes.
court? Okay.
Yes.
The judge can't
extends to
refuse.
all.
Can't
It
refuse.
extends an audience in person. But if you are represented by a lawyer in a court, then you are not given a right of audience. You
Right.
only if the judge asks you something personally, calls upon you to come in front, there cannot be two persons addressing the court on your behalf. So if there is a lawyer, you would have to sort it out with your lawyer as he becomes your mouthpiece in the court.
What if you had a lawyer and then the lawyer had to go away somewhere? Can you then sort of take over?
You can take over for that day's proceedings.
Okay.
And say, my lawyer is in difficulty. This is the thing. I am giving this application. No court will bar you from doing so. They may only ask who are you in the proceedings and so on and so forth.
Right.
Then Karan's next question was, when you file a petition against a department and get its reply, which is faulty, should you write in again and point out the faults? Yes, you are obliged to do so, to put the record straight and point out what is the fallacy of that. That can be a continuation of your grievance or your letter that is made. You can always make the subject as your letter dated so and so, reply bearing so and so, and this is in rejoinder to that. Does an order have to be pronounced orally by the authority? As I have said, it is very clear and mandated by the High Court that when an authority is performing a statutory or a quasi-judicial function, it has to declare that judgment in open court. Pronounced orally means declared in open court. Now, very often, this is not being followed, but this is a mandatory requirement pursuant to a judgment of the High Court, and it should be followed and brought to the notice of the authority if they decide to function any other way. Mohan Kumar has asked me on functions of Komnidad. Now, Komnidad is an age-old association of persons in villages that was there. Their functions basically are towards their gaonkars, who are the persons. It is like a temple. Only those people who are the mahajans of the temple have a right to decide on its functioning and so on and so forth. So also with Komnidads, they have that right towards their gaonkars. Now, this question may come as regards the allocation of plots. Now, in terms of law, the Komnidads are mandated to give a list of all their vacant plots to the administrator every year for course of action of allotment and so on and so forth. There is a procedure under the Code of Komnidads which is there for the purpose of allotment of such plots. The procedure is different if you are falling under certain categories which the government has brought by amendment of allocation of plots to government servants, army personnel, so on and so forth. But that is a procedure that is mandated. Basically, functions of the Komnidad is a very broad spectre. Their functions are only towards, as I said, towards their gaonkars. They cannot be asked to function for the well-being of the entire society as some people propagate them to be. But no, their functions are primarily towards their gaonkars, and only the gaonkars have a right to demand something from the Komnidad that is to be done. My esteemed colleague, Mr. Rui is there. He wants to ask any question before I proceed further.
Yeah. Yes, Dr. John, very well elucidated. I want to ask you, in my personal matter, before the Registrar of Cooperative Societies, who also has a dual charge, like one is executive, the other one by law hears disputes. In my personal appearance before the then Registrar of Cooperative Societies, Mr. P.K. Patidar, when I had filed a dispute under the old Act, Section 91, and he had not issued any notice or not initiated the proceedings. I was told to get out because I had written a letter to Jamir, the then governor. He told me, get out, you are writing to the governor. Who the hell is the governor? I am the authority. So at that time, I told him very calmly that your appointment is by the governor of Goa. Please read your appointment letter. The governor of Goa, I hereby appoint you so and so as the registrar of company secretary. So I very much appreciate the 3 Ps which you initiated, which I need a lot, because in my personal appearances before various authorities in my personal matter, I've been insulted because of political clouds. They were
just to interrupt. I would say that there have been various cases that of this nature, of which happens before collectors and all, and it is actually contemptuous that they behave in such a manner. A complaint can be made and even a writ petition can be filed for particular action. Very often it happens behind closed doors and with their own confidants and without any other person in the side. So that becomes a bit of an issue, but otherwise it is definitely contemptuous.
So where is suppose one to raise a grievance of such insults?
You can go to the secretary,
okay,
to the government of Goa.
Thank you.
Now, Advocate Bhakti has asked a question that we have applied to Panchayat for illegal construction within their jurisdiction, but the Panchayat is not taking any action for 1 year now. Just have issued stop order, but physical construction going on. What's to be done? The Panchayat takes what to be done so that Panchayat takes action. Now, under the Panchayat Raj Act, there is a judgment of the Honorable High Court in the case of Nazar Silva, where the High Court has given clear guidelines of step-to-step action, that the Panchayat cannot issue stop work order and just sit over it. You have every right that issuing a stop work order does not mean any action, but you have a right to go and apply to the Deputy Director to take action, where the block development officer, being the executive, will be asked to see that the construction is stopped at site. So there is a full mechanism under the Panchayat Raj Act, though I must admit the government is more interested in other matters rather than giving proper teeth to this act, Panchayat Raj Act, which does not have the full teeth to actually physically on site stop and see that the construction is stopped, because they should have the powers under the Panchayat Raj Act to get the police to issue stop work and see that the orders are executed. But it seems that the government is busy in other amendments, but not giving teeth to this basic thing. But the Deputy Director of Panchayat does have the power to direct the block development officer. In fact, within 30 days, if they do not bring the matter to a conclusion and decide on the issue of the illegal construction, you have every right to go to the Deputy Director of Panchayats. How does one be polite when one is told to get? Okay, that I've already answered Rui's question, which was next. Why do comunidades often not take action against unlawful use of their land by tenants, use of paddy fields for shops, etc.? This is basically, to answer your question, it is complacency of the comunidades, political interference, so on and so forth, which have allowed these institutions to be completely decimated and abused for ages together. But under the law, if, let me be very straight, if a person claims to be a tenant, agricultural tenant of any land, he can do no construction on the same. The authority to take action is the Office of the Collector, and under the Goa Land Prohibition of Construction Act, there can be no construction of whatsoever nature on a land that has an agricultural tenant. There is a lot of history to that act. but the government was forced to introduce that act, and that act has got teeth and requires the office of the collector to take action against any such change of user to non-agricultural use on agricultural tenanted land.
Can I just follow up on that? In my experience, very often it's the tenant himself that does the, very often on comunidad land, that does the illegal construction. And the comunidad obviously takes no action. And then when one writes into the collector as well, no action is taken. So then what is the next step?
Basically, you will have to file a petition to the High Court for a direction to take action. To rush to the High Court at the first instance would somewhat hold the hands of the High Court in acting in the manner. But when you have gone to a particular authority and all you are asking is the authority to do its job, then the High Court would definitely interfere in such a matter.
Thank you.
Susan Koshi has said, I appreciate your. Could you share with us an example of a difficult issue where the 3 Ps work to find a breakthrough? Well, to answer your question, I have seen that very often the administrative executive authorities always anticipate an aggressive approach by a disgruntled citizen. But when that approach is different, it normally, because they are used to getting aggressiveness right through the day. When one comes in with a different approach of a polite nature, I have seen it in my personal experience that, people who have been shunned just two places before me have been obliged by that officer. And though Claude may say it is your handsome looks and all that, that has nothing to do with it. It is just that at that moment, they are not used to getting a polite word. It catches them completely unaware, and you very often get a positive answer. Even they go back to search for that file and so on and so forth. You have to it's just, probably how you do it. But personally, I have experienced it, that it does work and it will work, especially when you go at around 11:30, 12:30 to these offices. Half the time they are already discussing what they want to have for lunch and things like that. So you're always caught in these situations. If you go at 5 o'clock, they're already taking their powder cans and going to the bathroom to freshen up and comb their hair to sit in the bus. I don't know why they have to do that, but that is what we face in many of the government departments. But a polite word completely catches them unaware. Politeness with perseverance is my answer to that. They know that you are pursuing the thing and you're being polite despite, and you have to say, if she says, Ata Zaina Falayo, you can always say, Madam, this is the 6th time you're telling me this. Kindly tell me which time you will have the time, and I will come at that time to this. I will make, tu busy, busy ni. That puts them on this thing, like I have told very often court staff and people who have said, no, आता आमका time ना बरे, माका खूप time असा, तू सांग कुंचे time आर येवपा. Then they feel, totally taken aback, like a lawyer is telling them that he is all the time free to come. It's a check and balance talk. But तुम्ही कायच काम करीना, तुम्ही दिसभर बसलेले असता, then they'll say, what do you think, this fellow has done, I have done, I cannot come, just come tomorrow, and that's the end of the issue. So it's a little bit of give and take play, which will, of the 3 Ps, which will see you through these circumstances.
Thank you very much. I think what I take away from what you just shared is that don't let your ego come in the way of the cause.
Basically, and very often one of the basic thing that happens to us is that we are propagating our own cause, and that's when it becomes close to heart, and sometimes we tend to be a little bit more aggressive in these matters.
I think we have crossed
Just
time, but we'll try
Claude
and answer those
Alvarez's
which are
question
remaining.
about possession of land prior to 1975 is mandatory because that is what is the mandate of the Agricultural Tenancy Act. It is the date on which, appointed date on which you are a tenant. But if you want to prove agricultural tenancy after that date, it is very difficult because you would have to show how you came into possession of that land by way of a particular lease deed or deed given by the owners of your possession. And obviously your name will not find mention in Form 1 and 14 if it is not prior to 1975 because the survey was done at that point in time.
One important question we
1975, April 1975.
One important question was, are comunidades covered by RTI?
Now that is a debate that is still on, but in my view, comunidades do not take any grants from the government. They are forced, one employee by the government who the government pays upon them, but otherwise the comunidades are self-governing bodies. They do not take any grant from the government, and therefore in my personal view, subject to whatever other persons have, comunidades would not come under the purview of the Right to Information Act. However, to get over this, you can ask the RTI to the administrator of comunidades, who is the supervisory authority and fully a part of the government. So if you're any letter that goes from the administrator to the comunidad is bound to answer. So to get around that, you would have to make the RTI application to the administrator, who is bound to give you the reply.
I think that office is in Panjim, right, in front of the church.
There is for Ilyas it is here. For Mapsa it was in that dilapidated building just opposite Tar, where the BSNL office is. It was.
Okay. I think we have one or two more. Can you please elaborate about time frame to be decided regarding illegal construction matter at level of panchayat/director panchayat?
Okay, there is a 30-day time period by which the panchayat has to act, not only by giving a show cause notice, but within 3 months. It is mandated by the judgment of Nazar Silva. I don't have that citation offhand, but I will just try to get it for you. Just give me a moment. Any other question in the meanwhile?
If you are aggrieved by the order passed by a Mamledar and collector, which is the appellate authority?
The administrative tribunal is the appellate authority which governs under the Munkar and Tenancy Act, and many acts of the executive, the appeal lies to the administrative tribunal.
There is one more regarding Comunidad annual review of vacant plots. Do you mean plots that are not cultivated?
Pardon me, I didn't get you.
Regarding Comunidad's annual review of vacant plots, do you mean by plots that are not cultivated?
No. These are plots for allotment to persons for construction of houses and so on and so forth. It is to the landless and persons who are the Gaunkars who don't have anything on their own. Who want a plot for construction of their house.
So basically, it is not agricultural.
It can also be done for lands which can be used for agricultural purposes and for grazing fields, whatever you want, allotment of their available lands. But as you know, today, nobody is going to give uncultivated land to be brought under cultivation, and the last person to do will be the government.
Unless it's the yellow house in Fathodda. I think we'll cut short over here because it's 7:40 and we also need to reach home before the curfew starts at 8 o'clock officially. So if there is only that last thing.
But if you just get that citation of Nazar Silva, it is a judgment of the Honorable High Court which gives a whole purview. Probably in your next session, I will ask someone to just have it sent through. So thank you once again. Thank you for giving me a patient hearing. And
yes, and thank you very much, Advocate John.
In some way to.
There is our usual tradition from Goa Foundation that every speaker gets a bag of some organic food. Okay, so that's been given by on behalf of all of us to Advocate John.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And that's the boy who helped us today with the CCR TV. Yeah. Okay. So thank you everyone for joining in today. Our next session will be on Monday.
And stay safe.
Our next session will be on Monday, where Dr. Claude will be speaking on how to draft a demand for justice letter. Okay. So we'll see you on Monday. Thank you so much. Yeah. Bye.